On a quiet summer morning, the ocean waves touched the shore with a soft rhythm. The sky was painted in shades of gold, and the sound of the wind mixed with the cries of distant seagulls. Emma loved mornings like that. She always came to the beach before anyone else, carrying her small notebook and a cup of coffee. Riding near the sea made her feel alive. She had been coming here every morning for months, ever since she moved to the small coastal town of Brighton Bay. It was peaceful, far from the noise of the city and the chaos of her old job. She wanted a fresh start, a new beginning. As she walked along the sand, she noticed something shining near the waterline. At first, she thought it was just a piece of glass, but when she came closer, she realized it was a bottle, a small, green glass bottle, sealed tightly with a cork. Inside, there was a rolled-up piece of paper. Emma's heart started to beat faster. "Is this message in a bottle?" she whispered to herself, feeling a strange excitement. She picked it up carefully, brushed off the sand, and looked around as if someone might be watching. But she was alone. She sat down on a rock and pulled the cork out slowly. Inside, she found a note, yellowed by time, the edges a little torn by moisture. The handwriting was elegant, written in blue ink. It said, "To whoever finds this, know that you are not alone. Somewhere out there, someone is thinking of you." No name, no address, just that one simple, powerful sentence. Emma smiled. "That's beautiful," she murmured. She folded the note again and looked at the horizon. But as she turned the paper over, she noticed something else written on the back, a date. It said, June 12th, 1984. Her smile faded. That was more than 30 years ago. She looked at the ocean, thinking about the person who wrote it. Who were they? Why did they throw it into the sea? The thought stayed with her all day. At night, when she tried to sleep, she couldn't stop thinking about the message. "You are not alone." Those words echoed in her mind. The next morning, she returned to the beach with her notebook again, but this time she didn't write. She walked along the coast, hoping to find another bottle, another clue, but there was nothing. Later that week, she decided to visit the small local library in town. Maybe she could find something about messages in bottles or old stories about Brighton Bay. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Cooper, smiled kindly when Emma showed her the note. "Oh, dear," Mrs. Cooper said softly. "That handwriting looks familiar. Wait here." She disappeared into the archives room for a few minutes and returned holding a dusty journal. This belonged to a man named Thomas Green. He used to live here in the 1980s. A quiet man, always walking along the beach, writing letters he never sent. Emma's eyes widened. Letters he never sent? Yes. Mrs. Cooper nodded. After his wife passed away, he wrote messages to her and threw them into the sea. People said it was his way of coping with grief. Emma held the bottle tighter. A man writing to his lost love, and somehow, decades later, she found one of his messages. She felt a connection she couldn't explain. That night, Emma sat by her window, listening to the sound of waves outside. She opened her notebook and began to write. "Dear Thomas, I found your message today. I don't know who you were, but I feel your pain and your hope. Maybe this is how souls speak across time." As she finished the note, a tear rolled down her cheek. She closed her notebook, feeling strangely at peace. But something deep inside told her this story wasn't over yet, because sometimes a message from the past can change the course of a life forever. And Emma had no idea that this simple bottle was about to lead her to something extraordinary. The following morning, Emma woke up before sunrise. The sky was still dark, with faint stars shining above the horizon. She couldn't stop thinking about Thomas Green, the man who wrote that message decades ago. She walked down to the beach again, carrying the bottle in her hand. The air was cool and smelled of salt. The tide was lower than usual, revealing rocks and shells that had been hidden the day before. She sat down near the water, her notebook on her lap. She opened it and read again what she had written to Thomas. Somehow, writing to him, even though he was long gone, made her feel less alone. As she watched the sunrise, she noticed something glimmering near the rocks. Her curiosity sparked once more. She stood up and walked closer. To her surprise, there was another bottle, smaller this time, clear glass, sealed with wax. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. Could it be another message from Thomas? She carefully broke the seal and took out a folded piece of paper. The ink was faded, but still readable. "To my dearest Mary," it began, "if this message ever finds someone else, may it remind them that love never disappears. It only changes form. I will keep sending my words to the sea, hoping one day they will reach you." Emma felt chills run down her arms. The handwriting matched perfectly. It really was him. She sat down on the sand, staring at the letter, tears welling up at her eyes. "Thomas, you really did write to her," she whispered. "And somehow I found your words. The idea that love could last beyond death, carried by the waves across time, felt both heartbreaking and beautiful." For days after that, Emma couldn't focus on anything else. She kept thinking about the two letters, reading them over and over. There was something so deeply human about Thomas's messages, so full of emotion, yet so peaceful. That week, she visited Mrs. Cooper again at the library. "Do you know where Thomas lived?" she asked. The librarian nodded. "Yes, dear. His old cottage still stands by the cliff road, though it's been empty for years." Emma thanked her and decided to see it for herself. The cottage was small and worn, surrounded by wildflowers and ivy. The front door creaked as she pushed it open. Dust floated in the air, and the smell of old wood filled the room. She stepped inside cautiously. Everything looked frozen in time. A wooden chair by the window, a small writing desk, and piles of yellowed paper tied with string. On the wall hung a framed photograph of a young couple. Emma knew instantly that had to be Thomas and Mary. She walked closer, her heart heavy. The woman in the picture was smiling, holding a seashell in her hand, while Thomas looked at her as if she were his whole world. Emma touched the frame gently. "You must have loved her so much," she said softly. Then she noticed something on the desk, a notebook still open with one unfinished page. The ink had faded, but she could still read the last line. If love truly reaches beyond time, maybe one day some will find these words and know that I was here. Emma gasped. It was as if he had written it for her, as if he somehow knew she would come. She spent hours exploring the little house, reading through his journals. Each entry was like a fragment of his soul. Letters to Mary, reflections about life, hope, and eternity. When she finally left, she carried one of the journals with her, unable to resist. It felt like a bridge between their worlds. That night, she couldn't sleep. She opened the journal again and read aloud by candlelight. The words filled the quiet room, like a whisper from another time. She began to write her own response in the margins of his old pages. Thomas, I found your home today. It's still standing, surrounded by flowers. I wish you could see it. I don't know why I'm writing to you, but somehow I feel you can hear me. The candle flickered, and the room grew colder. For a brief moment, she thought she heard a faint whisper, the sound of paper moving, or maybe the sea breeze sneaking through the window. She froze. "Hello?" she said softly, her voice trembling. There was no answer, only the distant echo of waves breaking against the rocks below. Emma laughed nervously and shook her head. "I'm imagining things." But as she closed the journal, she noticed something strange, a tiny seashell resting on top of the notebook. She was certain it hadn't been there before. Her heart raced. Coincidence or something else? She didn't know. But that night, she realized that maybe, just maybe, the sea was still carrying his messages. And perhaps now it was carrying hers too. The next morning, the rain had stopped, and the sky was painted in shades of soft blue and gold. Emma walked again toward the sea, the journal pressed against her chest. The waves were gentle now, as if the ocean itself had quieted to listen. She sat down near the same rocks where she had found the bottles. The air was heavy with salt and memory. She opened the journal and began reading one of Thomas's last letters, one she hadn't noticed before, tucked between the pages. "Mary, if you ever find this, know that I never stopped waiting for you. I sent 1,000 letters into the sea, not because I believed they'd reach you, but because it was the only way to feel close to you again. Love is not measured in time, but in how deeply we remember." Emma's hands trembled as she closed the journal. Her heart ached, not for Thomas, but for everything he represented. Love that endures, words that refuse to die, hope that clings to the waves. She whispered into the wind, "Thomas, if you can hear me, I found your messages. You're not forgotten." At that moment, the sea breeze grew stronger, lifting her hair, swirling sand around her feet. A deep peace washed over her, not fear, not sadness, but something different, a strange, comforting warmth. When she looked up, she saw something glimmering far beyond the shoreline, a faint light, flickering like a lantern in the fog. It shimmered for a few seconds, then vanished. She blinked, unsure if it was real, but deep inside, she felt certain it was him. Days passed, and Emma's life began to change in quiet ways. She wrote every morning by the sea, always beginning her letters the same way. "Dear Thomas." She started telling his story online. The mysterious bottle, the letters, the lost love found by the waves. To her surprise, people were moved. They sent their own stories of love, loss, and hope. They wrote about people they missed, people they prayed for, people they had never stopped loving. Soon, the story spread beyond the small town. Journalists came, curious about the girl who had found messages from another century. The local museum even offered to preserve Thomas's journals in bottles. But for Emma, none of that mattered as much as the quiet moments by the sea. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat with a journal open and began to write what she knew would be her last message to him. Dear Thomas, I think I finally understand. You didn't send those letters to be found. You sent them because love demands to be remembered. I want you to know that your words have reached not just me, but the world. You reminded us that love never ends, and that no message is ever truly lost. Thank you for letting me find you. She folded the page carefully, placed it inside a new bottle, sealed it, and held it to her heart. Then, with a deep breath, she threw it into the waves. The bottle floated for a moment, caught the reflection of the dying sun, and disappeared into the endless blue. She watched it go until she couldn't see it anymore. When she turned to leave, she saw something in the sand, a shape she hadn't noticed before. She bent down and gasped softly. It was a seashell, the same kind Mary had held in the photograph. But this one was carved delicately, with words so small she almost missed them. She brought it close to her eyes and read, "Thank you for finding me." Her breath caught in her throat. For a long time, she stood there, tears streaming down her face, the wind lifting her hair like wings. She smiled. "Goodbye, Thomas," she whispered. "You can rest now." As she walked away, the waves crashed gently against the shore, like a heartbeat, fading into the distance. And somewhere beyond the horizon, carried by the eternal sea, a message drifted in the opposite direction, from him to her, and from her to all who would ever love and lose and still dared believe. Messages from the Sea became Emma's first published story. Years later, when readers asked her where she got the idea, she would always smile and say the same thing. "I didn't write it. I just found it